This episode of the Europuck podcast is brought to you by DraftKings. This weekend's UFC 261 is sure to be a can't-miss event, and every punch, kick, and knockout means so much more with a DraftKings lineup. DraftKings, the official daily fantasy partner of the UFC, is giving you a shot at huge cash prizes, folks. For this weekend's fight, DraftKings is offering all players a shot at millions of dollars in total prizes. If you haven't tried it yet, Fantasy MMA is really easy to play. Just pick 6 different fighters, stay under the salary cap, and pile up points for advances, takedowns, and so much more. There's no better way to put your MMA knowledge to the test, and getting the chance to win millions of dollars in total prizes certainly makes it all the more worthwhile. If the UFC isn't your cup of tea though, don't worry folks, as DraftKings has plenty of money up for grabs in their basketball and hockey tournaments too, so you can make it rain on whatever sport is your go-to. Download the DraftKings app now and use promo code THPN to get a shot at millions of dollars in total prizes throughout the week. That's code THPN to get a shot at millions of dollars in total prizes only at DraftKings. A big thank you to DraftKings for sponsoring this episode. Hello, bonjour, hello, hi, heya, and privyet, hockey fans. Welcome back to the Europuck podcast, the show where two Brits talk all things European hockey as part of the Hockey Podcast Network, brought to you by DraftKings. My name is Hayden, or Oddman Rush, as you can see up there on the video version if you are watching it. And joining me, of course, once again, like he does every single week. I mean, if you're new to the show, then yes, this would be useful, but if you're not, you kind of expect it at this point. It's Chris Gadsby. Hey, Chris.
That intro gets longer and longer every single week.
It really does, doesn't it?
Some other way of introducing me every week.
I've got to try and find new exciting ways because we've been doing this every week since last August. So if I just say the same thing every week, it just gets boring after a while, doesn't it? As you can tell with you listening to me have to re-record the ad reads at the beginning of every single podcast about 4 or 5 times. But anyway, Chris, how you doing today, bud?
Yes, not as bad. Got a week off work this week, which is great, obviously,
yes.
But it's also really strange because normally, like, when you get to work, you get to the office, and then when you get a week off work, you're at home.
Yes.
And now I'm working at home and having a week off work at home, and I'm at my desk with my work computer on because it's where I get all the scores and stuff from, so it just feels normal.
Yeah.
It's kind of strange.
It's kind of like you've taken up a different job for a week. Because you're doing the exact same routine, you're just like doing something slightly different in that routine on the stuff that you're doing. But
yes, and for some annoying reason, even though I'm off, I'm still waking up at like 10 to 6.
You know,
really
yeah,
annoying.
You know what? Recently, I've been waking up at like 8 o'clock in the morning for the last like 4 days straight, and like bearing in mind, I usually stay up till like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, you're on a complete different clock to me.
I'm on the YouTuber's schedule, Chris. We don't sleep at all. So like I wake up, usually on like a good day, I wake up at like 10, 11, right? You know, I stay up till 3 o'clock. I deserve a bit of a sleep in as well. But then, yeah, the last couple of days I've been waking up at like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm thinking, why on earth? Maybe it's because the weather's getting nicer and it's getting sunnier and much nicer. And it's getting a little bit warmer, so it's a little bit warmer where I'm sleeping. I don't know, but I'm glad that the weather's getting a little bit nicer. It's made things a little bit less depressing. You know, like things are starting to open up a little bit more. Yeah, the hockey season's coming to an end for a lot of these leagues, which is a shame, of course, because we do love a good bit of hockey here on the Europuck podcast. It's kind of our thing. But at the same time, it's nice to kind of have some nice weather outside. You know, I go walk the dog and, you know, I'm not freezing every single time I go. So you can't really complain in the grand scheme of things. But Chris, before we get onto the hockey, I need to know the latest on Chris Gadsby's homeowner stories. What's the latest?
Oh, well, I filled the skip full of stuff. I spent the day today demolishing my second garden shed.
Okay.
Which was getting a bit tatty and rubbish anyway. So that's been demolished. So I've had to order another skip. So yeah, I got to wait a few days for that to come. So kind of can't do any more in the garden. So I might actually go out and have some fun on my day off and my week off. So
you'll probably be sitting there thinking, what can I actually do? I'm not used to having time off.
there is a bit like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Charlotte and I are actually having to sit down later on and go, right, let's look at what's open, what's nearby, what can we do?
Yeah, literally, like the only exciting thing I've done this last week is get my hair cut. which, I mean, isn't that exciting in the grand scheme of things.
I do that myself now.
Oh, fair enough. I mean, I can't really, I can see, like, I don't have hair in my eyes all the time now, which, is a bonus. It's very helpful. Like, I don't have my fringe, like, sitting there in my eyes. But other than that, it's not really that exciting, is it? Just kind of getting your hair cut, like most people do. But, yeah. Don't we live excited lives? I bet there's, like, teenagers listening to the podcast be like, oh, I hope I never get like those guys. You will. You will. Just
me, yeah,
just give it some time. Once you grow up a little bit, just give it some time. I'm even not like I'm not fully adult yet, and I still do boring stuff all the time. So.
Do you remember when you were a youngster and you kind of, I don't know if you did, but you kind of got really envious of your parents because they always got post and you never did. And now, like, I always get post, but it's always just a bank statement or a bill or junk.
Yeah,
there's no good stuff in the post.
I'm not quite at the point that Chris is at where he's obviously got his own house and everything, but I do know that example. But all the letters I get are to do for car insurance. Like, is car insurance like every single time?
Breakdown.
Yeah, breakdown. All of that covers like 4 or 5 letters in the post over like a week period. It's like, I don't need new car insurance. Thanks for the offer, though. I appreciate it, but I'm not going to read your mail. Leave me alone. But anyway, enough about 2 mid-20-year-olds rambling about how old they're getting and all the stuff they have to look forward to over the next few decades. Let's move on to some actual hockey, shall we, Chris? Because I feel like that's why we're here. So apart from the Elite League, it's basically all playoffs. We're just talking playoffs.
It is.
Some of them haven't quite started their playoffs, or the seedings have been decided, but they haven't played their first games of the postseason yet. We can talk about the seedings regardless. Some of them very close towards the end. So let's just kick off, I think, with the KHL. I think is a good place to start, like it always is. The KHL, it's the usual. We're now in the finals. We obviously had a discussion last week that CSKA Moscow had made it through to the Gagarin Cup finals, but we were waiting to see the final result between Akbars Kazan and Avangard Omsk because that went to 7 games.
We were.
And Chris is very happy to see that the second seeded team, the lower seed, managed to make it through to the Gagarin Cup final. So as it stands, the 2021 KHL Gagarin Cup finals is between the Western Conference's CSKA Moscow and the Eastern Conference's Avangard Omsk, which funnily enough is an exact replica of the 2019 Gagarin Cup Championship. So, so 2 of the best teams that have been 2 of the best teams for the last couple of years, once again, are still 2 of the best teams. So nothing too crazy to report on that end. Chris, do you have any notes from the first game of the series? Because I know the first game has been played. I think the second game is being played today and might have started by the time we finish this.
Yeah.
But is there anything you want to mention in particular?
Yeah, so I mentioned last week that, as you said, it's a repeat of the 2019 final, and Avangard Omsk would want to avoid what happened in the 2019 final, which was a CSKA Moscow sweep.
Yes.
They have already avoided that because in game 1, which was on Sunday night, it's Tuesday as we're recording this, they took game 1 convincingly, really, away from home by 4-1. Took the lead in the first period, doubled it in the second. And although CSKA Moscow got one back early on in the third, a power play marker with 8:37 to go, and then a 4th goal with 2:22 to go, just sealed it as being a 4-1 victory for Avangard Omsk, despite the fact they were outshot 29-26. So they've already avoided that. As you said, there is this next game, which starts at 5:30, so in just under a quarter of an hour's time as we're recording this now. So I'll keep an eye on that as we go through some of the other leagues as well. But really strong for Avangard, a good start for them. Bear in mind that 7th game against Akbars Kazan went into overtime as well, so that must have been very stressful. An overtime game 7, just over 3 minutes in that. 3 minutes in that overtime. But Avangard Omsk, I mean, from my point of view, because they're the lower ranked side, I want Omsk to go ahead and win it all, really. Yeah, I completely agree. I'd love to see Omsk go all the way, not only because they're the lower seed, but you've also got to remember, they, like Chris mentioned, they were swept in the 2019 Gagarin Cup finals, so to see them kind of get a bit of revenge on the team that swept them last year would be quite a bittersweet thing, I think. And also the fact that
they were like I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, they're the only team in the Final Four in this competition that have yet to actually win the Gagarin Cup. So it'd be really nice to see a new team finally get their hands on the trophy. And also, watching CSKA and Moscow lose is never a bad thing in my book anyway. It's also worth mentioning that Omsk took that game in Moscow because, you know, they're the lowest seed, so Moscow got the home ice advantage. And following on from that, we talked last week about how the first 6 games of the Kazan-Omsk series was all won by the away team, and it set a new KHL record. The 7th game was also won by the 7th seed, being or won by the away team, being Avangard Omsk, since, you know, Kazan were the highest seed in the series, so they got home ice advantage. Meant that game 7 they also had home ice advantage. So for the first time in KHL history, a conference final no less was decided. Every single win was won by the away team, and Omsk has carried that on into the Gagarin Cup final. So they've actually won 5 straight games away from home. Now, they've obviously lost 3 straight away from home, or at home as well, which obviously isn't very good for them. I think they'll want to kind of improve their home record going into the Gagarin Cup finals. But yeah, starting off by taking the first game of the series, they've already done better than like Chris mentioned, than they did in the 2019 tournament. I don't think it's going to be a 4-game sweep for Omsk by any stretch of the imagination. Moscow are a strong team.
Yeah, I mean, I'll extend that. It's 6 straight away games because they won game 6 away from home of the quarterfinals.
Oh,
so it's 6 straight away games. Yeah, I don't really think this is going to be a sweep. I've been looking at the dates. They will have played, if required, which I think it probably will be, game 5 by the time we record next week.
Okay.
So they'll be well through that. So of course it could be done when we record next week, but I think more likely there'll be 1 or 2 games to go.
And the last thing we want is for the Gagarin Cup finals, one of the best playoff tournaments in the continent, across Europe, across the kind of this side of the globe. You don't want it to be a 4-game sweep. Like, how boring is that? You don't want to see...
I'm sure Avangard fans would disagree
absolutely,
with
absolutely.
But everybody else...
Yes, exactly. As kind of a fan of hockey itself, you don't want to see those later rounds being sweeps. Like, we didn't get a sweep in the conference finals. It was a 6 and 7-game series. You expect something like that. And similar with the Stanley Cup playoffs, even with something like, you know, the Polish League playoffs, the Danish League playoffs, like, you want to see, once there's only a couple of teams left, or even the final 2, you want to see them being the best of the best, and it being a matter of inches between some of these plays deciding who wins and who doesn't, because that's what makes the sport so great, seeing those the top teams go at it to decide who's kind of the best team that season. And having a sweep just kind of takes away from that a little bit, except for the team that wins. I'm sure they'll never complain with that, like Chris mentioned. So yeah, not a huge amount to report so far in the Gagarin Cup finals, since only 1 game has been played. Like Chris mentioned, this time next week it's the 20th of April, I'll add, because Chris mentioned it's Tuesday. It's Tuesday the 20th of April. Hopefully it will be about 4 or 5 games into the series. So we'll have a lot more to talk about in terms of individual games and guys kind of stepping up and getting the job done for their team. So similar to the last couple of weeks, I should say, we're going to look through the leagues that are deeper into the playoffs, not necessarily higher up the European table. We're going to kind of go through the leagues that are much closer towards the end of their playoffs and take a look at what's going on there. So I feel like the best place to move on to next is the Czech Extraliga, because they are getting very close towards the end of their playoffs. So we talked about the semi-finals, the conference final stages, or it's basically the semi-finals, because I don't think they do it via conference, their playoff system. And obviously we had 2nd seed Trinec against 3rd seed Mlada Boleslav, and 1st seed Sparta Prague against 4th seed Billy Tigri Liberec. And we talked about how Liberec went 3-0 up in that series. Sparta Prague managed to pull it back 3-3, a 7th game to decide who was going to go through to the Extraliga playoff finals. And Chris let me know last week, he sent me a message via Twitter, that Liberec managed to hold on. They managed to get the win. What was that game 7 like, Chris?
Well, it was only 2-1.
Oh, really? Okay.
So, it was really close game. They went 2-0 up. They were 2-0 up at the end of the second period, but Sparta Prague got one back within the first minute of the third period.
Wow.
So it was, a really intense final game there. But yeah, Liberec got through in 7 games to face Trinec in the final. The Trinec Mlada Boleslav one was also a 7-game series. Talk about that in a moment. But yeah, they almost threw away the 3-0 lead. They just crept over the line. Liberec, of course, they have to win as I said last week, I've been doing loads of research and looking at the Champions Hockey League and all that stuff. They have to win the playoffs to get into the Champions Hockey League. So from if you're a Liberec fan, you need to win the playoffs. Trinec were already there. If you're a Mlada Boleslav fan, you want Trinec, the team who knocked you out, you want them to win the playoffs because it means you'll get the Champions Hockey League spot. And it's going that way at the moment, really. With Trinec, we're leading by 2-0. They dominated the first game by 6-2. And in fact, after only 14 minutes and 10 seconds, the netminder was pulled after they went 3-0 down. I'll see if I can get any individual player stats on there. Yes, there we go. So it was Kavaka who was pulled. Petr Kavaka was pulled by Liberec after 14 minutes and 9 seconds after saving 5 from 8 with a 62.5 save percentage.
Ouch.
So yeah, wasn't great there for him. So they dominated that first game by 6-2. And then the second game was 3-1. It was 2-1 going late into the third, but then an empty net goal made that a 3-1. So Trinec are 2-0 up against Liberec in the final of the Czech Extra League playoffs at the moment. They are playing games 3 and 4 on Thursday and Friday. I would imagine that games 5 and 6 and stuff will be kind of Sunday, Monday. So I imagine that it'll either be finished or we've played kind of 5-6 games by the time we record next week.
Absolutely. And obviously Liberec aren't having the best time in the final, like you said. Not exactly the best start for them, allowing 3 goals in kind of the first period or the first 14 minutes of play. But the one thing I will say about Liberec, obviously they almost coughed up the 3-game lead in the conference finals or the semi-final series, which obviously isn't great. But I do like the fact that even though they had given up 3 straight games, like you said, they managed to score the first 2 goals in that game 7. Yeah, they allowed a goal in the first minute of the third period, but they managed to shut it down to the point where they only allowed a desperate Sparta Prague team, who in the third period are getting desperate, you know? There's 20 minutes of play left to decide whether they get to go through to the final and kind of get the chance to live up to being the first seed throughout the regular season and kind of blitzing their way through the playoffs, or going home earlier than they were hoping or expecting to. So I've got to give, you've got to give credit to Liberec for managing to shut them down to the point where they only allowed 1 goal in that final game, which is a rather convincing win, all things considered. And then you mentioned the Trinec and Mlada Boleslav series. Now, I remember last week that this one was a little bit more back and forth than the Prague Liberec series. Do you want to go into a little bit more detail about that?
Yeah, so it went... It was going back and forth, and it did go back and forth all the way. It went 1-1, 2-2, 3-3.
Right.
But then Trinec just really got on top of it in the final game. They were at home. There were no spectators, but they won by 3-0, shutting it down.
Wow.
Late on in the series. It was... Well, there were 2 empty net goals right at the end. So all the scoring came in the third period, 1 at 7 minutes on the power play. And then Mlada Boleslav, they took the 10-minute players bench penalty, which wasn't great. But then there's 2 goals inside the final minute for Trinec, 2 empty net goals, because, of course, Mlada Boleslav, game 7, you're a goal down. You've got to throw everything at it, haven't you? So it was a very back and forth series, but it was Trinec that managed to get through. And as I said, they dominated game 1. Game 2 was closer between Trinec and Liberec. All the goals coming with the special teams, to be honest. So it was 2 power play goals in the second, 1 coming off the back of an illegal check to the head with a 5+ game. And then Liberec got a power play goal in the third, and then an empty netter. So, if it stays kind of 5-on-5, Liberec might stay more of a chance, but they took a lot of penalties. In fact, they've taken a lot of penalties in both games. We've got 2+10s and a 5+10 in game 1 as well. So their tempers are kind of getting the better of them in many respects, and they find themselves 2 games down with it all to do.
I can imagine the coach of Liberec is probably quite angry with his team and will probably sit there in the pre-game locker room and just say, please just stay out the box, guys. We have a chance to win if we just don't give up any power play opportunities. And hopefully they'll listen to him, and maybe they'll be able to tie the series up and make it a little bit more competitive. If not, might be a sweep. So I guess we'll have to wait and see.
31 penalty minutes in the first game. Sorry, in the second game, and 55 penalty minutes in the first game.
Okay, yeah, they need to stay out of the box.
So if you've taken 86 minutes of penalties in 2 games, there's something going wrong.
Yeah, you need to stay out the box there, Liberec, if you want to have a chance of coming back in this series. Although Mlada Boleslav fans, they probably won't be wanting that, because like you mentioned, they want a trip to the Champions Hockey League next season. I've missed the Champions Hockey League. I'm looking forward to that coming back next season.
Yeah, we'll talk quite a bit about that later, because as I said,
absolutely.
I've done quite a bit of research into it, and it'll be interesting. Looking forward to coming up with scenarios and stuff later on.
Absolutely. So let's move on to, we've got a couple more leagues that are still that are in the midst of their playoff finals also. I wanted to start with the Extraliga in that sense, because, they're one of the leagues higher up the European ladder. I want to move on to the Ice Hockey League, the predominantly Austrian league. They are also taking part in their playoff final. We had first seed HC Bolzano, the Italian side, taking on the Austrian side Klagenfurt, both of which took a 5 or 6 game series in the semi-final round. And as things stand right now, the lower seed, which Chris will be very happy about, the lower seed, Klagenfurt, 3 games to 1 up on HC Bolzano. Chris, how has that happened?
Yeah, so it was... they were 2-0 up when we recorded last week.
Yes.
And we were kind of going, what's going to happen here? And Bolzano managed to get one back with 2 goals in the third period in game 3 to make it 2-1. You thought, okay, that's going to be a bit closer. Klagenfurt in overtime it needed. So Klagenfurt, I messaged you in the week, you may remember this. Klagenfurt scored 16 seconds into the game in game 4.
Wow.
A really strong start from them. They held on to it for most of the game, but then Bolzano managed to equalise with just over 12 minutes to go in the game. It needed overtime, and it was Klagenfurt who got that overtime goal. So they lead by 3 games to 1. And game 5 is tonight.
Oh.
So, it could all be done. It starts at 6:30. It starts in an hour on our time. So, that could be done tonight, which is, again, another league. We've already had the French league, the Norwegian league and the Polish league. They're done.
Yeah.
And everything else is getting there as well. This league, by the time we record next week, the KHL could be done. The Czech Extraliga could be done. The Austrian league could be done.
Yep.
We're so close to the end now. Austria, even though they're a founding member of the Champions Hockey League, because they haven't performed that well, we already know the 3 teams in the Champions Hockey League. So there's no hockey leagues up for grabs or anything. Klagenfurt are already the Austrian champions. They've got that trophy. They're trying to do the double. But yeah, Bolzano, I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting one because, I think Klagenfurt just come out of it a bit better. They're on a good winning streak, perhaps. I mean, they won, 4 games in much quicker succession. I think Vienna gave Bolzano a much harder time than it did, because Bolzano, it was 2-2. Then they had to turn the screw, but they won the first game 6-0, as we mentioned. Because I remember the first 3 games had been done, or the first 2 games, because we said how Bolzano just haven't been scoring.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if Bolzano have got injuries, something like that. But fair play to Klagenfurt, who are playing really strongly. They were only 3 points behind them in the end of the first stage. And then by the end of the second stage, they're only 1 further point behind them. So there's not really been anything to choose between the 2 sides all season.
No, exactly. Obviously, when you see the first and second seed, you automatically assume, the first seed, they're the best team in the league. They obviously stood head and shoulders above the rest of the competition. But when you realise, the difference was only a couple of games and a couple of wins here or there, you realise, okay, so these teams were a lot closer than some people might have initially thought, and that's why the series may have gone this way. And you mentioned kind of the run-ins that these 2 teams have had. I think it's worth mentioning that Klagenfurt, whilst they've had they've had a decent run in the first round. They played the 8th seed, and then obviously they got the chance to. They had you could argue, a more difficult run in the semi-final by playing the 3rd seed instead of the 4th seed. They've actually had a better record in those first 2 rounds than Bolzano did. Yeah, the difference is only Bolzano got an extra loss, but like you mentioned, that can make a bit of a difference. Playing an extra game means that there's a chance for players to get a little more banged up than some of the other players that they're playing might get. Or there's the opportunity for them to be a little bit more tired, and kind of Klagenfurt are a little bit more well rested. They can take the advantage early on, which they clearly have. Sorry, you were going to say, Chris?
Yeah, I was going to say you've covered exactly what I was going to say there, in the sense that Bolzano have played an extra game, and that game was 2 days later. So they've had 2 days less to rest up, which Klagenfurt have, get over any knocks, something like that, which I suspect is, part of the reason towards that 6-0 in game one that we had. Vienna, of course, in an elimination game would have been given it everything, so it would have been a bit more physical, as you said. True. Again. So I think, there are a number of factors. And yes, Bolzano, they came back into it with 5-4 in the second game, but again, they were shut out then again in game 3, and they've got to now win 3 straight games, one of which is going to be on the road. So they've got to win both their home games and a road game. And, Klagenfurt have won both of their road games so far. So even if Bolzano, bring it back to 3-2 tonight, Klagenfurt are going to go back to their home barn and get the kind of the support from that, in terms of they know their own barn so much, and hopefully they can finish the series. Well, they'll be hoping they can finish the series off. But this one, they're playing every other day, so I imagine they're playing tonight, maybe Thursday or Friday, then Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So I think whatever happens, the Austrian League will be done when we record next week.
Yeah, I would imagine so, given the fact that it'll be about a week round, and, given the way that the playoffs is usually run, it's usually either a game every 2 days or a couple of games, then a day or two off, then a couple of games back to back in days. So, yeah, I'd fully expect the Austrian League to either go to a game 7 or be complete. I think the way things are going, you would expect Klagenfurt to kind of finish off the series either next game or in the 6th game of the series. But,
I think so.
Sports is one of those crazy things that it's never over until it's completely over and the final buzzer sounds. So it'll be very interesting to see how that one ends, and we'll see if the second seed can manage to hold on and take that victory and get the double like Chris mentioned. So the only other league that we've got to look at that's in its final stage is the Danish Metalligaen, which is a lot more lopsided, or a very similar result so far, following a similar trend to the Ice Hockey League. Obviously, we mentioned last week that the Rungsted Sea Capitals, my boys, and the Aalborg Pirates, the first and second seed in the regular season, both of which had a pretty similar route to the playoffs, as it were. Rungsted swept their first opponent, as did Aalborg. Then it was a 5-game series for Rungsted in the semi-finals, where it was a 6-game series for Aalborg in the semi-final for them. And then it's 2-0 up for Rungsted. They've played a pretty convincing final series so far. I would imagine it's a best-of-7 series for this final, if I'm not mistaken. So
it is, yeah.
So they could potentially be halfway through the series. I would expect a second seed like Aalborg to take at least one game kind of out of desperation, maybe a couple of games, maybe even tie up the series, because, these two teams were pretty close in the standings by the end of the year as well. So similar to the Ice Hockey League, yeah, there's the first and second seed, and the first seed is up by 2 games. You might think, oh, okay, well, this is locked and this is done. Like, nothing to see here, guys. This will be done by this time next week. But when you realise that these teams are actually a little bit closer than you would have thought, there's only one game separating their respective journeys through the playoffs, I would expect there's going to be a little bit more of a fight back from Aalborg over the next few games. So how did we get to this point where Rungsted is 2-0 up in the series, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important, and this is where I kind of like this time of the year, because when we're not trying to cover a week's worth of fixtures in 11 leagues, we can go more in depth into some of them. And the point you made there, it was a really good one, that the teams are closer than it looks. And the teams are closer than even the scoreline looks. So if we look at game 1, just as an example, Rungsted won it by 3-0. And you think, okay, yeah, shut them out, all the rest of it. It was 0-0 with 3 minutes to go.
Oh, wow, okay.
And then Rungsted scored at 17-13, 19-29, and 19-44. It doesn't say it. I suspect those two were empty netters.
You would have thought so,
with 30 seconds to go, but it doesn't say it. But with 3 minutes to go, it was 0-0. They managed to get that goal with 2:47 to go. As I said, I suspect those final 2 were empty netters. So it was only kind of a 1-goal game in terms of the teams properly against each other.
Yeah.
Then if you look at game 2, it was a 3-2 game again to Rungsted, and they just kept exchanging. It was 1-0, 1-1, 2-1, 2-2, 3-2. So these games are a lot tighter than the scoreline and the series perhaps looks at first glance.
Absolutely, and like you mentioned, and kind of what we've discussed a minute ago, it would be very unsurprising to see Aalborg be 2-0 up in this series, judging by how close it's been for the large majority of the time. Like you mentioned, a 3-0 win for Rungsted in game 1. You think, that's a pretty textbook win. That's kind of the perfect hockey win for any team, a 3-0 win. They get 1 goal every period. They shut the opposing team out. That's kind of seen as like a textbook hockey win, isn't it? Like the most routine, conventional win that a coach could ever dream of. But then you realise, like you mentioned, that they scored the first goal of the game with 3 minutes left to play. Okay, so this game is a lot closer than you would think on the surface.
Yeah, they had 57 minutes of 0-0 hockey.
Literally, and then the next game, exchanging goals, is a 1-goal game. So I would very much imagine that there's going to be a 1-goal game that goes the other way by at least one that goes the other way by the time this series is over. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun to keep an eye on. So it's going to be really strange because this time next week we could have several different leagues done again, and then we're only talking about a handful of different postseasons. So
I know.
It's gone really quick. Wow. To be fair, we're getting towards a year of having done this podcast, so it does make sense. But then when you
and it is getting towards the end of April as well.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. So
he's got to.
No, exactly.
World Championships, I saw a thing on Twitter into the World Championships are 30 days away.
Jeez. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because we've been talking about the World Championships for literally the last 9 months, it kind of still feels like it's months away. But it's like, actually, no, it's not. Right, so that's the last league that we've got to look at that's currently in the final stage of its postseason. We're gonna take things back a little bit for the next couple of leagues, as we look at some of the bigger leagues in Europe that took a little while to get to their playoff stages and have a bit more of a confusing way about how they've done things, but we'll update you with the latest scores. So let's start with the Swedish Hockey League, which has been quite an interesting one so far as things stand. So once again, so similar to the Swiss National League and the Finnish Liga, I mentioned it the last couple of episodes, first through 6th seed all got a first round bye, so it's only the 8th and 9th seed and the 7th and 10th seeds that played in the, quote, first round of the playoffs. Whoever wins those two goes through to kind of the proper playoffs, where it's basically the top 8 teams in the league. So in the quarterfinal round, we had a lot of sweeps. There's only one bracket that's still waiting to be decided, because that's the only one where the opposing team has actually won a game. The first seed Växjö Lakers beat Färjestad. First seed beat the 8th seed, 4-0 sweep. Interestingly, the 6th seed Åbro beat Leksand with a 4-0 sweep. So, the 6th seed are kind of fighting strong there. They got a first round bye, and they're proving all their doubters wrong. And then Rögle BK and Frölunda, the 2nd and 7th seed, a 4-0 sweep to Rögle. So the perennial Champions Hockey League champions, Frölunda HC, unfortunately can't make it past the second round. They beat Djurgården, one of their rivals, in 3 games in the first round. But that was their last win, basically. They didn't win another game for the rest of the playoffs, and they're out. So the only quarter-final stage that's still left to be played is Skellefteå, the 4th seed, against Luleå, the 5th seed, and it's gone to 7 games. So if you ask me, Chris, this one's going to kind of go either way, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's tonight as well, which is really exciting. So we'll have to see what happens there. But yeah, I was just looking at all the fixtures. I mean, Örebro for a start. I mean, that's the one I think we've got to look at first of all. Not only have they swept Leksands, but they have absolutely dominated Leksands. They held Leksands to 1 goal in each game.
Oh wow!
They won 6-1, 2-1, 7-1, and 2-1 again.
Wow.
The defense of Örebro has just been all over it. It was, they held Leksands to 18 shots in game 1. They held them to, they had 29 in game 2. Game 3, they had 23 again. And then in game 4, they had 31. So, the defense, it's not like they've been blocking all of the shots. There's been plenty of shots getting through, but the net minding for Örebro has just been outstanding. And now they've got, the game against the Växjö Lakers. Now, Örebro, of course, if they win the whole playoffs, yes, it's 8 games away, 8 wins away at the moment, but they'll get that Champions Hockey League spot. The one left in the Swedish Hockey League. Frölunda didn't put up much of a fight against Rögle, which I'm a bit surprised about. I mean, that one we recorded on the Wednesday last week, and they were 3-0 down at that point, and then they lost by 6 goals-1 in Game 4. So they really didn't show up. And Skellefteå against Lillea as well, another really strong showing in that one. That one, it's been back and forth. It was 1-1, 2-2. Now it's 3-3. And that one's really really strong as well. As I said, it's Game 7 tonight. Skellefteå hosting. And those games, they've been a lot closer games. So that's as you probably expect from the 4th and 5th seed. Let's be honest. They finished, 5 points between them in the regular season, but you would expect closer games between those two. The winner meets Rögle, who of course have been really strong. Orebro, how far can they keep that run going? They're coming up against a very strong Växjö side. But of course, both of them have got there off the back of sweeps. So, they've played the same number of games, they've had the same rest, all this, back and forth stuff. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in that Game 7. Then earlier on in this semi-finals, they've got games on Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. So we'll have the first ones there. Interestingly here, and again, I haven't researched it, but if you click on the semi-finals, it only shows 3 games. I believe the semi-finals have gone down to best of 5.
Okay.
Which may well be to get it done before the World Championships. I think we might see a lot of that.
Yes.
In these leagues that we've got. And obviously the Liga and the DEL, which we'll come on to, shorten their series all the way. But yeah, that looks like it's going to be best of 5. So, we could be well on the way. If there's a sweep or something, we could have our finalists by next week as well.
Which would be pretty crazy indeed. But just going off a couple of things that you said, if there was any series in the quarterfinals that you would expect or put your money on to go to 7 games, the 4th and 5th seed is probably the most likely one out of all of them. So it's kind of anybody's guess who's going to go through. And you mentioned once again the Växjö Lakers and Rögle kind of getting that 4-0 sweep in that series. It's very reminiscent of the earlier stages of the Czech Extraliga, kind of before they reached the semi-final stage, where the top 4 seeds all made it through to the semi-finals, and all of them swept their opponent in the round before and got a first round bye because they finished top 4 or top 6. I think it was the top 4 in the Czech Extraliga. They finished all top of the league, so they got a first round bye, and the first 4 games they played, they completely swept their opponent. So it was very difficult to predict where things would go. I feel like it's going to be very similar for the Växjö Lakers and Rögle BK. That said, you mentioned Orebro's kind of solid defensive work and kind of shutting down opponents' opportunities. Yeah, they're getting a solid amount of shot attempts, but the goaltending's been solid, and obviously the defense has been giving him a chance to kind of see as many pucks as he can to only allow 1 goal a game. If there's any team that could kind of take on the first seed Växjö, I would imagine Orebro's probably got the best chance of anybody, given their solid defense. I mean, yeah, you could make the argument for Rögle obviously being the second seed, but the fact that Orebro, they're probably going to be feeling quite confident going into that series, going, yeah, we may be playing the first seed, but our defense did a really good job of shutting down the 3rd seed in the entire playoffs last round. They only allowed 1 goal a game, so their goaltender's probably riding really high in that tournament. So I feel like the pressure's really going to be on Växjö at this point to kind of prove that they're the stronger team. And, the 1st and the 6th seed, you would be like, oh, okay, well, the 1st seed's probably going to do a really good job against the 6th seed. I would imagine there's not going to be that much issues for them there. But if their goaltending keeps standing on its head, if their defense keep giving him a chance to kind of see all the attempts coming his way, they could make it kind of difficult for the Växjö Lakers, which I think would be very exciting for the SHL playoffs. But, I'm not sure Växjö fans would like that, given the fact that they're kind of the favourites to win the championship. So, although Orebro fans, I'm sure, would love to kind of clinch that Champions Hockey League place. And then, obviously, the other semi-final series, we can't really tell what's going to happen there because we don't know who the other semi-finalist is. And
not a clue.
Yeah, no. It's good that you mentioned kind of maybe going down to a best of 5 series, potential 3-game series, because, like you mentioned, several of the other leagues in Europe have already adopted that, so it's worth keeping in mind as we move forwards into the next couple of leagues. Speaking of which, let's move on to Oh, sorry, yeah, you were going to say? Yeah, go for it.
Well, I was going to say, you've forgotten again the Swedish Hockey League. We've had the conclusion of the play-out series as well.
Oh, yes, my mistake.
Which was 3 games in when we recorded last week. But Brynäs won Game 4 and Game 5 to take the series by 4 games to 1.
Wow.
Which means that HV71 have been relegated to the Allsvenskan. The Allsvenskan is still in its playoffs, so we don't yet know who's coming up, because I do believe it is the playoffs rather than the league winner.
I would imagine so.
So
yeah.
we don't yet know who's coming up, but HV71 will not be in the SHL and therefore the EuroPuck podcast next season.
Interesting. So the 14th seed in the regular season ended up being the worst of the worst, as you would expect, considering they were right at the bottom of the standings. So Brinas,
I mean, they were at the bottom of the standings. They finished 6 points adrift of Brinas. So you kind of feel like that was probably the right finish. But yeah, no HV71 in the SHL next season.
That's a shame. But then again, Brinas lives to fight another day. They've been in that position before, and I think you went through the history of them being in the relegation, and they managed to survive more often than not. So, obviously, history and the hockey gods were on their side in that playout, and I completely forgot about that. Thanks for bringing that up, Chris, because I would have completely blitzed past it, as you saw. Let's move on to the Swiss National League now. We're getting down to the final few leagues that we've got to talk about. We've got the Finnish Liga, the DEL, and the Elite League to talk about afterwards. But let's talk about the Swiss National League, because boy, has this been an exciting playoff run so far.
Swiss National League has been brilliant.
Chris has been telling me how excited he is to talk about this one. So let me take you through the kind of results where things stand right now on the 20th of April, this Tuesday. And then, Chris, I'll let you take the reins. You could talk about whatever series you'd like. So similar to the SHL, first seed through sixth seed got a first round bye. 8th and 9th seed played. 7th and 10th seed played in order to go into the kind of proper first round, as it were. Now, we're in the process of that proper first round, and there's been some very interesting results that have taken place. The first seed, EV Zug, taking on the 9th seed, SC Bern. The series is tied at 2 games apiece, so it's going to take at least 6 games to decide this series. First seed, I mean, EV Zug kind of stood head and shoulders above everybody else in the National League by the end of the season, both in points and points per games played. So they were the undisputed leader that season. And the fact that the 9th seed SC Bern, that for much of the start of the season were sitting in the relegation zone or the playout zone, even though they haven't had that this year in the Swiss League, the fact they've managed to climb up and not only make it to the quarterfinals, but, you know, go toe-to-toe and kind of balance out with the top team in the league is a pretty impressive feat. Then you've got the 4th seed Lausanne against the 5th seed Zurich, who both had a first round bye. So both of them very much well rested, had the chance to kind of, you know, deal with any nagging injuries before they took on their first opponent in the postseason. And Zurich have taken a pretty commanding lead in this series, which I'm quite happy about as a Zurich fan myself. 3-1 in favour of Zurich. So the 5th seed is currently beating the 4th seed. I'm sure Chris will update us with when their next game is. I can't imagine it'll be that far away. Tomorrow. So yeah, so by the time this goes out, Zurich could be through to the semi-final stage, or Lausanne might stage a comeback. Now, I think the most interesting one and the most fun one to talk about is the Rapperswil Jona Lakers, the 10th seed in the entire playoffs. They beat the 7th seed HC BLBN. A 2-0 sweep is a best-of-3 series. So Rapperswil, they go through. They're playing 2nd seed HC Lugano, who had a pretty good year for themselves, all things considered. Most of the year they had games in hand, and that managed to help them with their overall points per game, which is what decided the Swiss National League at the end of the year. And the Rapperswil Jona Lakers also have a 3-1 series lead on their opponents. So they've obviously been looking at how Zurich's been playing and thought, you know what, we want to have that series lead as well. So the Rapperswil Jona Lakers, the 10th seed, are 1 game away from going through to the semi-finals, which would really put a spanner in the works, not just for the Swiss National League, but other than Krakow in the Polish league, kind of be the furthest the lowest seed has made it into the playoffs of any kind of these competitions, because we've obviously talked about the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th seeds always making it through in practically every single league we've looked at. Let's get a 10th seed in there, lads. That'll be exciting. And then we've got another upset looking like it might take place with the 3rd seed HC Fribourg Gotteron and the 6th seed Geneva Servette HC. The 6th seed Geneva Servette HC currently also taking notes from Rapperswil, thinking, yeah, we, you know, there might be a bit of a mismatch in our seedings, but we're also going to take a 3-1 series lead. They're also 1 game away, so we could be in the position where we've got, just for argument's sake, let's go 9th seed SC Bern against 5th seed Zurich in the next round, and then the 10th seed Rapperswil Jona Lakers against the 6th seed Geneva Servette HC. We could have a semi-final round where none of the top 4 teams make it through to the semi-finals. How crazy is that, Chris?
Yeah, I know, and you could have a final of 9th seed versus 10th seed.
Oh, that'd be so great. I want to see it.
I mean, obviously, I like to look for the patterns and stuff, as you know. If we take the Zug and the Bern series out of this, that's a bit different. So if you look at the other 3, where the lower ranked sides are all winning 3-1 in the series, the interesting thing to look at is that the higher ranked sides each won game one. So the higher ranked sides each went 1-0 up, and then the lower ranked sides have come in and won game 2, game 3, and game 4 to take this 3-1 lead. The Swiss National League, they play all their fixtures together, so they're all playing tomorrow, Wednesday, as we're recording this. So it could all be done tomorrow. But I suspect then they're all playing. So everyone's playing tomorrow, then everyone's playing on Friday. So then any game 7s will be on Sunday. So we will know the semi-finalists by next week. Even if they go to game 7, we'll know who they are. Zurich will be, I don't know really, because Zurich, who finished in 5th spot, obviously they want to win the playoffs, but if the 1st, 2nd, 3rd or 4th seed wins the playoffs, they get that Champions Hockey League spot. But if you end up with Bern, Zurich, Rapperswil and Servette, then it's whoever wins the playoffs. So Zurich have got to win it to get in. It would be such an SC Bern thing to do to win the playoffs and grab that spot, though, wouldn't it? After the season they've had, it would be such a Bern thing to do to take it.
Oh, for sure. Now that you've mentioned that we could have an SC Bern 9th seed, Rapperswil Jona Lakers 10th seed final, I want to see it, Chris. How unique and how exciting would that be for the podcast? Just kind of looking at it and being like, you know what? We're in a position where the 9th seed, talk about every single other playoffs that we've talked about. The furthest that one of them's gone, I think, is the 6th seed, which was Krakow, wasn't it? Obviously, some of the leagues have less teams that make it to the playoffs, or they have less seedings and everything, and they're all done a lot differently. But the fact that the 6th seed made it to the final, and that was impressive, let's have the 9th and 10th seed go. Let's do it. Rapperswil, you could make the argument that Rapperswil didn't have a very good season this year, but they've really somehow turned it up for the playoffs.
They finished 10th out of 12 on 56 points.
Yeah.
Bern are also on 56 points. Lugano, who are obviously now down to Rapperswil, had 92 points. Bern on their 56 points are tied with Zug, who had 119 points.
Wow.
Zug more than doubled Bern's points tally over the 50-game season, and yet Bern are tying them at 2-2 in the playoffs. Servette and Zurich, they got the first round buys, which is fair enough, but they were still, a decent chunk away from everybody else. So I would just love that to be the case and have these lower ranked sides getting through. And I think I'm really just supporting Rapperswil at the moment.
Yeah, we're honorary Rapperswil Jona Lakers fans and SC Bern fans. I just want to see something a little bit more unique and a little bit more exciting, because this is what the playoffs is all about, right? And it very much emphasizes the point that it doesn't matter if you finish as the top team or you just squeak into the playoffs. Once the playoffs start, it's a completely different season, and you can really go on a run and make your own of it. So, come on, SC Bern, Rapperswil Jona Lakers finals. That's what we want. But anyway, let's move on to the Finnish Liga now, one of the stronger teams, stronger leagues across Europe. So very similar. They also did the top 6 teams get a first round bye. However, I believe, and Chris will be able to clarify this for me, the 8th and 9th and the 7th and 10th round wasn't necessarily based on a best of 3. It was done by 2-game aggregate, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it was a 2-game aggregate score. So if you look at Ilves and Koko, it was 1-1 in terms of the games, but 6-4 on aggregate to Ilves. Karpat, they did win those 2 games. That finished 7-3 on aggregate. But now we jump into the normal first 2, whatever. The Finnish Liga, as I mentioned last week, they're shortening their playoffs. It's best of 5. So Luke only 1 game away from the semi-finals. But obviously, they're the only team that's a 2-0 up at the moment. So
interesting. So, just to round up the scores and the standings and how things are right now. So, the 8th seed Eels managed to beat the 9th seed Kuku in the kind of play-in round. Like Chris mentioned, it says the 1-1 score, but it was 6-4 on aggregate. And then the 7th seed Karpat managed to defeat Vassen Sport 2-0 in the series. So they won both games, so it doesn't really matter what the aggregate score was. And then we now move on to kind of the proper first round, the quarterfinal round, as it were. And if it's a best of 3 series, like Chris mentioned, or best of 5 series, like Chris mentioned.
Best of 5.
Luko, the first seed, are only 1 game away from sweeping Eels, the 8th seed, who managed to earn their place in the position. Then 4th and 5th seed, Tapara and Kalpa, who both got a first round bye. Only 1 game been played in that series so far. and Tapara takes it. So the high seed currently leading there. God, they're not following the Swiss League trend. That's very upsetting. Then we've got we've got IFK Helsinki, the second seed, taking on Karpat, the seventh seed, and Helsinki taking a 1-0 series lead in that. And then the only kind of upset that's taking place so far is third seed TPS Turku taking on the Lahti Pelicans, who are the sixth seed, both of which had a first round bye because it's the top 6 teams that get a first round bye. And the Pelicans are 1-0 up on TPS Turku. So there's one lower seed managing to kind of take the lead, but like Chris mentioned, it's a best of 5 series, so everything could change by this time next week. Anything you want to add, Chris?
Yeah, I'll just put in a bit of a caveat on that the games are all happening today.
Oh, okay.
And some of them have already finished and been updated on my screen, but obviously not on yours.
I'll refresh it.
You've got the tab open. So yeah, refresh it. So Luko, yes, they've gone 2-0 up against Ilves. But TPS Turku are 1-1 with the Pelicans.
Oh, okay.
Because TPS Turku won 2-0 today.
Nice.
So it's now 1-1 in that series. At the end of the second period, Helsinki are 4-2 up over Karpat. And with a couple of minutes to go in the second period, Kalpa are 3-1 up over Tappara.
Oh.
So those games, they won't finish by the time we finish recording this. But Helsinki are up, so they could go to 2-0, but Kalpa looks like it might go to 1-1.
Okay, fair enough. Yep, just refreshed it, and TPS Turku is indeed tied in the series with the Lahti Pelicans. So, yeah, so it looks like we're going to have Helsinki probably going up 2 games, and the Tapara, the Kalpa series, and the Turku Pelican series each having to take it to at least 4 games to decide the victor. So,
yeah, I mean, there's still a period to go, so a lot could happen.
Oh, of course,
but,
of course.
It may well go that way.
Absolutely. And obviously, we might have brushed over the Finnish Liga a little bit, but given the fact that they're still pretty much in the early stages of their quarterfinal rounds, there isn't a huge amount to talk about compared to something like the Swiss National League, where a lot of them have played 4 games in their series at this point. So let's move on to the penultimate league that we look at nowadays, and that is the German DEL. Now, I'm going to get up the regular season standings, so I've got the quarterfinal standings here, but it's worth mentioning none of the series have started games as we're recording this on Tuesday. I would imagine
the one series is just towards the end of the first period in game 1.
Okay.
But for the sake of this, let's say nothing's happening.
Exactly. So the full playoffs hasn't properly kicked off yet. So it's all the series are still 0 games for either side. So I'm just going to take you through the final DEL standings for the 2020/21 season. And then we can take a look at what the playoff matchups are. So, in the North Division, we had the Berlin Ice Bears with a perfect 2 points per match. Then second, we had Bremerhaven. Third, we had the Wolfsburg Grizzlies. And fourth, the Iserlohn Roosters. So the lowest seed that managed to make it through to the playoffs had a points per match of 1.51. And then the 3 teams that missed out on the playoffs in the North Division, Düsseldorf EG, the Cologne Sharks, and the Krefeld Penguin, with a beautiful 0.47 points per match. Then in the South Division, we have Adler Mannheim, who finished with the best points per match of the entire league with 2.29. Red Bull Munich taking second place, or the second seed in the South, with 2.08. Ingolstadt taking the third seed with 1.55. And the Straubing Tigers with a 1.43. So it looks like, I believe the Schweiniger Wild Wings is the team that missed out. Because I believe they were in a playoff berth last time we checked. And they missed it by 0.01, Chris. How heartbreaking is that? Oh, that's the worst.
I mean, they had 1 point more than Straubing as well. Straubing, there was the Home Roosters. They went into a quarantine period because of a COVID outbreak, and they just realised that they couldn't get that final game in, which Schweiniger might feel a little bit hard done by, because if, for example, the Roosters had won that game, Straubing's points per game would have dipped slightly below Schweiniger, and they'd have got into the playoffs. But unfortunately for them, it didn't quite work that way. So the DEL, an interesting one to look at. Like the Roosters, if they'd have won that game in hand, on points, they would have got above Wolfsburg and played Bremerhaven, not Berlin. So now there's all this kind of ifs and buts and stuff, but the playoffs are starting. Yeah, today, game 1 is today. Game 2 for everybody is on Thursday. It's worth mentioning as well, don't forget that the DEL has shortened everything to best of 3 right the way through in order to get it done before the World Championship. So we'll definitely know the semi-finalists by the time we we record next week.
Perfect. So speaking of the playoffs, we have the quarterfinals, which look like this. So the first seed, they've split it up between North and South Division again, which I think is the smartest thing to do. They have the Berlin Ice Bears, the first seed in the North, taking on the fourth seed Iserlohn Roosters, and the second seed Bremerhaven taking on the third seed Wolfsburg Grizzlies in the North. Then in the South Division, we have first seed Adler Mannheim taking on the Straubing Tigers, and the second seed Red Bull Munich taking on Ingolstadt. What's the game that's currently taking place, Chris?
It's Adler against Straubing, and in fact, Straubing have just tied it. So they're in the final minute of the first period, and it's 2-2.
Oh, okay. So a fair few amount of goals
Way to answer
being
back, actually. So Mannheim scored at 2:05.
Okay.
And then Straubing scored at 2:13.
Oh, wow.
So way to answer back to get a goal
8 seconds later. Jeez. Okay, then. And that's how you show that you're a fourth seed that isn't going to be trampled over. So fair play to the Straubing Tigers. So that is the last league that's in the playoffs as things stand right now. We only have one more league to look at, which is, of course, the UK's Elite Ice Hockey League Super Series, Elite Series thingy-mabob. So, as things stand right now, there's only about 3 or 4 games left to play for some of these teams. Well, for every single team, it's 3 or 4 games. It's all very close still. There hasn't been a team that's really pulled ahead, which, is worth mentioning. So, in first place, tied for first place, I should say, although they are in first place as things stand right now, the Sheffield Steelers. 8 games played, 5 wins, 3 losses, so 5-3-0 record, 10 points, and they've lost 2 straight games. So, they're hoping in their game in hand compared to Nottingham and Manchester, they pick up a win. Which is tonight. They managed to pick up an extra win. Second place is Coventry with 3 wins in regulation, so they're basically 4-2-2 in the tournament with 10 points also, although they've conceded more goals than they've scored, which is interesting and worth mentioning, although perhaps so has every single team except Sheffield, which is pretty crazy. And they also have 10 points. So is it Sheffield versus Coventry tonight?
It's Sheffield versus Coventry tonight, so something's got to give in terms of the tie at the top.
Yes, I would imagine that Nottingham and Manchester fans would really hope that game doesn't go to overtime or a shootout, just for the sake of where they could finish in the playoffs. Then you have the third seed Nottingham Panthers, who for the first time in the tournament aren't the bottom team in the standings, with a 4-4-1 record, 9 points, and they've got points in 4 of their last 5 games, 4 straight games, 3 wins in their last 4 as well. So they've managed to turn it up a little bit and pick up a few wins. And then last but by no means least is the Manchester Storm, who are also kind of 4-1, except one of their wins has come in overtime as opposed to regulation, which is the only difference between Nottingham and Manchester in the standings right now. And they have only won 1 of their last 5 games. So points in 2 of their last 5, but they started off hot, they've cooled down. Nottingham started off cold, have heated up a little bit. So obviously all of them are making the playoffs, the quote-unquote playoffs, so it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things where these teams finish, but obviously the team at the top will have bragging rights until the playoffs begin. So, every team's fan base wants it. Chris, what are your thoughts about the recent results in the Elite Series and how things are going?
It's really closed up. When we looked at it last week, Nottingham were really trailing down at the bottom, and there was a big gap. But it's really closed up. And as you said, every team makes the playoffs, so it's almost kind of hitting the playoffs in form is the thing to try and do.
Yeah.
And Nottingham are really the informed side at the moment. Nottingham and Coventry really going well at it with. 6 points in the last out of 10. Which teams around them haven't really done. Sheffield are struggling a little bit. And Nottingham, obviously, I have more of a vested interest in that with all BBC work and other stuff like that. And they really seem to be gelling all of a sudden and coming together. But they don't make it easy for their fans. What Nottingham have been doing is been going up big in games and then letting the other team come back into it and winning by a single goal, which is not particularly good and for the heart rates of many Nottingham fans. But I think it is really close. We've only got about another week or so of the regular season, and then we're going into this playoff system as well, and making sure that the Great Britain players are as prepared as they can be for the World Championships. But it has really closed up. I'm pretty sure that everybody has beaten everybody. No one's going to go into that thinking, oh, well, we've never beaten Coventry, we've never beaten Manchester. I think everybody's beaten everybody. So the playoffs will definitely be interesting when we get around to those next week.
Absolutely. And there's not really a huge amount to report on this because, like we've mentioned, there's only 12 games in the season anyway. So the good thing is it's nice to see that there's a bit of parity between all the 4 teams. We're literally talking about, yes, Sheffield and Coventry have a game in hand, but let's take it for argument's sake that one of the teams wins it in regulation. There's only a 3-point gap between top and bottom, which obviously there isn't going to be a huge amount of space between teams when there's only 12 games being played and there's only 4 teams taking part, I should say. But the fact that it could be a lot further ahead, we could have a team that just kind of wins all of their games, a team that loses all of their games, and it's a really big disparity. But obviously, it's to, like you mentioned, to get the GB players in form, and Mike Hammond's been playing well in the tournament, Liam Kirk's been playing well in the tournament, so we're getting a few of the more reliable or the guys, more go-to guys on Team GB's roster that either they had experience playing earlier this year or, they're playing their first kind of proper hockey, for want of a better term, in this tournament, and they're starting to find their form, so hopefully they can carry that through into the World Championships, and we can have a respectable finish, because we're not being relegated this year, there's no relegation taking place, but I think just kind of for my pride's sake, we'd love to earn our place back up in the top flight once again to show, we may not be a hockey powerhouse, but we can hold our own against some of the best teams in the country or the best teams in the world, so I'd be very happy to see that, and I think a lot of British hockey fans would too. So that's basically it in terms of the scores and standings and stuff. Chris, I don't know if you have a quiz or anything that you want to go through this week.
I know, I was just going to talk about the
Champions Hockey League. Go for it.
And the teams that are looking to be qualifying for that. So there are currently 7 spots available for the Champions Hockey League still to go.
Okay.
They're all going to playoff winners or the next best team. So I don't know if you still got all the tabs open or what. But,
no, I don't.
That's fine.
Is it from a Champions Hockey League article that you got this from?
No. This is from my own research.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, the most of them are. So the Sweden, because they are. So you've got Sweden, Switzerland, Germany, Finland, Czech Republic, and Austria are your founding leagues.
Yes.
So they get more teams than anybody else.
Yes.
Because Sweden and Switzerland over the past 4 years have performed the best from those, they get 5 teams each in the Champions Hockey League for next season.
Okay.
So one of the ones in Sweden has been taken up by Frölunda as the CHL champions. Then you've got Växjö, Rögle, and Leksands as the top 3.
Okay.
So, in the SHL, we've now got a situation where there is 1 spot remaining. And the more I looked into this, the more I like the way that the the Champions Hockey League has done this. So, the final spot in Sweden will either go to the playoff winner.
Okay.
And we know we're down to the last 5 teams in that.
Yes.
Or if the playoff winner is already qualified, it will go to Skellefteå as the 4th place side in the league.
Okay.
So Skellefteå at the moment have got essentially 2 routes to the Champions Hockey League. They can either win the playoffs, which of course they're still in, or hope that Växjö or Rögle win the playoffs, and then they'll get in that way.
Okay.
Because of course, if Örebro win the playoffs as the 6th seed, they'll get in.
Yes.
That's a similar situation in the National League, where Zug, Lugano, Fribourg, and Lausanne as the top 4 got through, are in the Champions Hockey League because of the league. So that will either go to the playoff winner or Zurich. Now, bear in mind that we've got Zurich as the 5th seed, Rapperswil, Servette are 3-1 up, and Bern as well. That may well go to whoever wins the playoffs.
Yes.
So we'll keep an eye on that. It's the same situation with Finland. It's either going to be the playoff winner or Tappara. The Czech Republic, it's going to be the playoff winner or Mladá Boleslav. And we know from the Extraliga that Liberec are 2-0 down. So if Třinec win those final 2 games, it'll be Mladá Boleslav. If Liberec win, it'll be Liberec.
Right.
Austria, we already know the top 3, Bolzano, Klagenfurt, and Red Bull Salzburg. So those are the founding leagues. And then we go into what they call the Challenger Leagues, which are leagues that only get 1 spot each anyway.
Yes.
So you've got Belarus, Minsk won the league.
Minsk.
Yep. In the UK, you've got Cardiff because they were given it because they had to pull out last year.
Indeed.
France, we know, is Rouen. Norway is Frisaska because they had the highest points per game. Poland is Jastrzębie because they won the playoffs. The Continental Cup winner is Sondersjijk from Denmark. That's that wild card spot to make it up to 32. In Denmark, it's whoever wins the playoffs between Rungsted and Aalborg.
Yep.
And then finally in Slovakia, because you get one Slovakian team, which I know is a league we don't normally cover here on the Europuck podcast. It's whoever wins the playoffs in Slovakia. And at the moment, they're in their semi-final stage there. And we are looking at, when it loads up for me, Zvolen, who won their league, are 3-1 up. And that's a best of 7 series. And then at the moment, it looks like it's going to go 2-2 in the other semi-final. So I'll have to wait and see for the final few. It might be a week or two for the final few spots. But particularly for these leagues where we're talking kind of, it could all be done. It's very, very close, or at least the semi-finals are close. We might see more of those spots being picked off in the next week or so. But I'll come back next week with any more teams that have secured their spots.
Yeah, absolutely. We always mention it as we kind of go through the leagues and any Champions Hockey League related stuff to that. So yeah, it's always good to keep an eye on it, and appreciate you doing the research, Chris. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it 13 countries that take part in the Champions Hockey League? It sounds like there's 13.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, 13 plus the Continental Cup winner.
Of course. Yeah. So 13 like legit countries that are secured at least one, and then there's the Continental Cup that can come from any of those other ones. So okay, interesting. So unless there's a quiz that you've got this week, Chris, do you have a quiz?
Nope.
I've
been too busy demolishing sheds.
Absolutely. You're too busy filling a skip and getting a new one, doing adult things, you boring adult man.
Yeah, all right.
Other than that, I feel like this is a really good place to end this week's episode. We've talked all things playoffs pretty much the entire episode. We've hit over an hour, so we've done a good job kind of going into detail on stuff. And we hope you guys have been enjoying kind of keeping track of the playoffs with us, because like, we sit here and, take a look at the playoffs every single week. It's not necessarily something I specifically look at outside of doing the podcast. So it's nice to kind of sit here for an hour every week and kind of look over all of the different scores and stats and the playoff results from across Europe and kind of keep tabs on what's going on and keep your finger on the pulse a little bit. So it's a lot of fun, and we hope you guys have been enjoying it as well, because the hockey season's starting to round up, and a lot of the leagues are almost done now, and they've got their champions. We know which of their teams are going through to the Champions Hockey League, or they've had to postpone or suspend or cancel their seasons and everything like that. But at least there's still some hockey going on as we're reaching the latter half of April. So yeah, I think it's a good place to end today's episode of the Europuck podcast. Thank you, everyone, whether you're watching on the video version on YouTube, whether you're listening via whichever place you get your podcast from. We really do appreciate it. Thanks for stopping by. So if you want to keep updated on all things Europuck podcast, or send us your thoughts, opinions, or questions, either from today's show or for our next show next week, then you can follow us on Twitter at Europuck Podcast, or on Instagram at Europuck Podcast. You can follow us on either or both, and you can send us a tweet, you can send us a message on Instagram, be like, you guys are great, and we can be like, oh, thanks. And if you enjoyed listening to either or both of your hosts today, which we do hope you do, because it's been over an hour now, so if you didn't, it'd be kind of awkward, then you can follow myself on Twitter at OddmanRushYT, or Chris at Chris_Gadsby. Thanks again for watching, guys, or listening, and we'll see you again next time. Have a good one, folks.